as distributing $5,000 checks per citizen trends, aka the Doge dividend. News outlets are doubtful this will actually occur, while others are telling their readers this could reignite inflation. And Democrat Congresswomen straight up tell you, you don't want that $5,000.
Now, President Trump says he likes the idea of giving some of the savings from Doge back to Americans as kind of a dividend. Would you support that?
Listen, he's just telling a lie. He's not the one that had anything to do with the $1,200 refunds that people had during the midst of COVID that was done by a Democratic House and Democratic Senate. Right now, what they're going to do is say, hey, we want to give you a refund, but Congress won't let us because they already know that there's just no money for that.
And this is just revisionist history. During the lockdowns, Donald Trump told the Democrats, if you just give me a bill that does nothing but put checks in Americans' pockets, he'll sign it immediately. But they kept playing games trying to fund their pet projects, getting their slice of the stimulus money first. And sadly, that's eventually what happened. But these Doge stimulus checks wouldn't have any room for theft, so by default, the Democrats are against them.
We had a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. The bad part is that I don't know if it's once in a lifetime because we know that Ebola, unfortunately, was detected right here in New York here recently. And if we continue down this road of getting rid of scientists or deciding that we don't want to rely on experts as it relates to what they're telling us to do, or we don't want to deal with vaccines and medicine in this country, then we may be facing not only our next pandemic, but our next 2, 3, or 4 pandemics because of their incompetence. So no, we are not in the business of giving out money. And honestly, I don't know what $5,000 will do for you.
Rich politicians telling viewers, I don't know what $5,000 would do for you, just shows how detached from reality these Democrats really are. As I remember working hourly, like most Americans do, and $5,000 is literally a life-changing amount of money. But what makes her brand of limousine liberalism even worse is she can't even shoot down the idea of Doge rebate checks without also justifying the pandemic stimulus checks and the possibility that we might have another one, which of course makes it so they can justify it again. So then she frames this as, those Doge cuts are directly impacting the scientists and experts that did such a good job last time, as if she doesn't remember literally everything the experts told us wasn't immediately reversed, where at best they admitted they just made it up, and at worst they were caught covering it up. But once you get past all those inconvenient facts, then she may have a point about the $5,000 checks being bad. As former Republican Congressman Ron Paul explains, there could be drawbacks.
The proposal is that Trump and Musk says that we're saving so much money, we ought to give it back to the people, which sounds very good. So just cut taxes. There's a lot to be heard, but I don't see this as enhancing what has been already contributed to us, and that is exposure, audit, how horrible this is. And the people are really upset about this, and it represents a system of bankruptcy. But I don't see this emphasizing, that particular point. And actually, if you're going to save umpteen billions of dollars on spending, the budget, well, the spending has to go down, the interest rates have to go down, payment, and then the deficit and the debt that exists has to go down. And that's a big undertaking. I don't see how this will add to it, but there's the two guys working on this are a lot richer than we are.
I remember back during COVID when they had the stimulus checks that they were sending out. Now, Thomas Massey, good friend of ours, board member of our Ron Paul Institute, he made, and I don't have it in front of me, I wish I had cut it, but I didn't, but he made a great calculation about how this quote unquote stimulus money that you're going to get is actually going to cost you more than you'll have in your pocket to spend through inflation, through special interest, getting more than you're getting, and all these number of things. So, and it actually played out exactly like he said, and I don't have it in front of me, but he made that good point. My guess is that he will be similarly skeptical about this money.
Well, that's a good point, because let's say they get their way and next week they're going to start it. They don't have money in the bank, so if they're going to live up to their promises and they have to start sending these checks out, they have to print the money, which invites more inflation.
Yeah.
And the prices go up, and people, well, I'm not any better off.
Yeah, you'll get your 5,000, but then eggs will quadruple.
And it's a very valid point. The stimulus checks last time caused rampant levels of inflation. Now, those checks were tied to billions of dollars of other spending that caused the majority of said inflation, but I too am not a fan of cutting checks for the sole purpose of making the citizens happy in the short term, but much worse off in the long term. So it almost seems like something that might just be a bargaining chip. All these Doge rebate checks are just a concept being passed around and not denied, but I haven't really seen any solid statements from Trump saying, this amount of money is going to you on this date. So it may just be a case of Trump pitching something popular that the people will love, and the Democrats by default have to say it's a bad idea because basically that's their entire platform now. Donald Trump doesn't need to actually start cutting checks, but he can still cash a political win, as the Democrats are still crying over Doge, saying Elon is hiding their findings, when in actuality, they are entirely transparent with all their findings at doge.gov, where it just reposts their tweets, which are very detailed on their findings, as Elon is learning from the best, actually taking up a chainsaw from Argentina's president Javier Milei.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw.
As the government wastes their finding is absolutely insane.
And the record topper, there is one person on Social Security who's 360 years old, which is approximately 110 years older than our country.
And anybody that hears that should immediately apologize to Elon and Trump, as this type of error shouldn't be possible, where someone is cashing checks that definitely shouldn't, or someone simply messed up on their paperwork and they're not actually 360 years old. Either scenario is something we should have detected so we can protect the taxpayer from fraud. But the idea that certain politicians want to look the other way for no other reason than Orange Man bad shows you that they too are likely on the take, as Ron Paul's son, Senator Rand Paul, has shocking discovery.
$4.8 million spent in Ukraine for social media influencers. While you're at it, but the people who vote for this, I've voted against all of this, but the members of the Senate who voted for this spent several $100,000 sending designers in Ukraine to the fashion show in Paris. It goes on and on.
And it sounds insane, but actually makes sense when you remember their president was taking photos for Vogue magazine while his people were at war. I think even the Democrats that are pro-war, that want to send every US tax dollar available to fight the war in Eastern Europe to save democracy in a country that canceled their elections, but even those deep blue liberals would likely be against funding social media influencers and fashion show appearances, and they wouldn't know where that money was going without auditing. But again, since auditing budgets has now become a Donald Trump initiative, they are now forced to be against transparency, while simultaneously ignoring Doge's transparency and crying over their willful ignorance. As I imagine everybody watching this channel is against wasting our money on this nonsense, but some of us don't think those savings should just be sent to the people, they should remain as savings. And if these savings aren't going to be turned into checks, what should we do with the additional $1 trillion remaining? We may possibly just stop collecting them.
President Trump has spoken about replacing income tax with tariff revenue, especially with all this waste, fraud, and abuse that we're seeing cut. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely, and in fact, if you think about the China tariff revenue that we're estimating is coming in from the 10% that we just added, plus the de minimis thing, that it's between $500 billion and $1 trillion over 10 years is our estimate. And that's something that is outside of the reductions that markets are seeing through the negotiations up on the Hill. And so we expect that the tariff revenue is actually going to make it much easier for Republicans to pass a bill, and that was the president's plan all along.
As the IRS has already begun mass firings, and getting rid of income tax is infinitely better than a one-time payment of $5,000, as one, over time each citizen is going to receive much more than a single $5K check, but two, it finally ends this relationship where the government acts like the citizen's pimp. slick talking the people into letting him hold all the money and redistribute it amongst us when we can prove a valid enough reason to get it back. And this analogy can just keep going, but I want to keep this PG, so in other words, I want the politicians to stop screwing us. But if you appreciate my concise, lighthearted commentary on the tragic status that is today's reality, hopefully I've earned your subscription, then go check out the video on how the corporate media tried to attack Trump but ended up just exposing their own corruption.